John chapter 20, verse 24. But Thomas, one of the 12, called Didymus, was not with them when Jesus came. The other disciples therefore said unto him, We have seen the Lord. But he said unto them, Except I shall see in his hands the print of the nails, and put my finger into the print of the nails, and thrust my hand into his side, I will not believe. And after 8 days again the disciples were within, and Thomas with them. Then came Jesus, the doors being shut, and stood in the midst, and said, Peace be unto you. Then saith he to Thomas, Reach hither thy finger, and behold my hands, and reach hither thy hand, and thrust it into my side, and be not faithless, but believing. And Thomas answered and said unto him, My Lord and my God. Jesus saith unto him, Thomas, because thou hast seen me, thou hast believed. Blessed are they which have not seen, yet have believed. Amen. Well, this morning we're wanting to look at a new philosophy, worldview in American society. It's a very dominant one. We're going to spend 1 hour this morning looking at that, and that is the philosophy known as skepticism. Skepticism. Now, this term skepticism and the related words like skeptic and skeptical have enjoyed a very widespread use in the English language. We will recall from our earlier studies that whenever you attach an ISM to something, you've made it into a worldview, a philosophy, a belief to which someone must consciously hold if they hold to it at all. The other terms, skeptic and skeptical, are enjoying a widespread use today. Many people use them, including ourselves. Many people are skeptics or skeptical about something, including ourselves, and there's nothing wrong with that. To have a good measure of skepticism in a person concerning certain areas anyway is probably healthy. You know, we're skeptics concerning the weather predictions for the next day or the next week, or we are skeptical about this, or someone will tell you that, you know, this leader said that, or this ministry is going to do that, or, well, what do we say? I'm rather skeptical about that. Someone who's not dependable or not trustworthy, we say, well, I'm kind of skeptical. When they say they're going to do something, we're skeptical about that. So we've all been skeptical about something. But skepticism is a major recent philosophy that states, in essence, if I could give you a brief definition of the philosophy of skepticism, certainty or certainty in a particular area or in particular areas is not possible. That's what the doctrine of the philosophy of skepticism has to say, that certainty or certainty in a particular area is not possible, that you just can't be certain. Now, there are different degrees of skepticism. The reason I'm giving you kind of a broad definition is because of that. People who are followers of skepticism through and through, dyed in the wool, as they say, who really believe it, who really embrace this, would say that the first part of that definition is the only part that's valid. Uncertainty reigns concerning everything in one's life. Other people follow skepticism only whenever it really suits them or fits them, and they would say that uncertainty reigns in a particular area or in particular areas. For instance, David Hume, the famous Scottish philosopher, David Hume was one of the early skeptics who followed skepticism. And by the way, most liberals in religious circles follow skepticism. They're skeptics. You'll see exactly what we mean by that term as we go along here. But David Hume, the Scottish philosopher, I'm sure you have heard of Hume's name, H-U-M-E, was one of the first and early leading proponents of the philosophy known as skepticism. Now, you may be sitting out there to begin with this morning asking yourself the question, wondering, well, how could anyone, I mean, we can all be skeptical or be a skeptic about something, but how could anyone follow skepticism? that certainty about anything is simply impossible. Well, you're going to see there's a very easy way. They have a logical way of kind of explaining this to show us why skepticism, as a consciously embraced philosophy and worldview, fits after all, and how some people can hold that, and with good intentions. They have reasons for holding the philosophy of skepticism. David Hume is particularly well known in Christian circles. He was not a Christian, but he had extensive writings against some of the claims of Christianity for his devastating arguments against the possibility of the occurrence of miracles. You have various philosophers like Kant and others over the centuries who have argued against one point or another within Christianity. David Hume is particularly well known for his devastating arguments leveled against the possibility of the occurrence of miracles. David Hume was, and I remember studying Hume even way back in college in philosophy classes I had. We had to look at Hume's arguments against the existence or the experience of miracles. And he has some very devastating logic to go along with it. But it has built-in flaws. His whole logic and his whole argument has inherent built-in flaws. We'll discuss Hume and his arguments against miracles. The Christian would say, it's too late to argue against them. They've already happened. The world was made. Israel went through the Red Sea. Jesus was raised bodily from the tomb. It's too late to devise arguments against the occurrence of miracles. They've just been occurring since the beginning of time. Now, Hume would like that type of response. It doesn't matter what Hume would like. Hume is dead and buried and below now. But his arguments against it are rather interesting. Interesting if in no other way, to be sure, let me say this, if in no other way interesting to the intellect. How someone could have devised such logical, to him anyway, and to some people, foolproof arguments against the occurrence of miracles. But even secular people, non-Christians, unbelievers, have detected the built-in flaws of Hume's argument that the logic simply won't stand, not under the weight of the scriptural testimony or the experience of the Christian who knows that miracles happen and occur, but they simply won't stand under the weight of the investigation of logic itself. That Hume's thesis and his hypothesis have flaws. And take a look, I would ask, to begin with this morning, at the very definition of skepticism. Skepticism is a belief that states that certainty or certainty in a particular area, let's take it in its broadest sense, that certainty is not possible. I'm going to explain how this came about, its origin, and why people have embraced this. I don't know if you've met anyone who is, truly a skeptic. Truly a skeptic. They'll probably be trying to convince you of their philosophy, the philosophy of skepticism. We all meet people that are skeptical. We are ourselves. It just depends on what you're skeptical about. Some people are skeptical about everything. That is a person who truly has embraced skepticism. But the first thing I would do to a person like this is ask them to look at their own definition. Definitions have a lot to say. Sometimes they have a lot to say about what they don't say. Skepticism's philosophy states that certainty in a particular area or certainty period is not possible. Well, if that's true, how can you be certain that skepticism is true? How can you be certain that certainty is not possible? It has a built-in flaw. That's some of the problems with Hume's arguments. They sound so like, wow, certainty is not possible. If you wanted in just a couple of words there, certainty, 4 words, is not possible, is the claim, the definition of skepticism. Certainty is not possible. That certainty, are you certain about that definition of skepticism? Well, they would have to say, well, yes. That's the definition of the term. Skepticism means that certainty is not possible. But according to this definition, couldn't we be skeptical about skepticism? Couldn't we be skeptical about the definition of skepticism? In other words, what I'm trying to say to begin with is that no one, but no one, holds to this view. They may say that they do. No one holds to it. Because if there's one thing they're certain about, it's the fact they're certain about the fact you can't be certain about anything. You have to be, or you can't follow skepticism. You can only follow it partially, part of the way, and then you don't have anything then. Either skepticism is true or it's not true as a philosophy. But part of it is that you've got to believe that certainty is not possible. But then we would question them about the certainty of their certainty, that certainty can't exist. That is simply impossible. So I think that you end up having a definition that says nothing at all. You have a bankrupt philosophy. You have a philosophy, this may sound like a rather elementary argument against it, but the same can be said about a lot of these philosophies, that they're just really names for nothing. What we see in the long run is that man, the way he is made, has a desire to nail things down. I mean, as he is made, he has a desire not to, it's not in his makeup to float around saying, who knows, I don't know. Man, the way he is made, desires to nail things down and know the answer to this question or that question, even if it's in no other way but to know this answer, that there isn't an answer. At least you know something. You're positive about it. I know that there is no answer to this question. That is your answer then. Your answer, an answer is what you would fill in the blank with that you're certain about. You're certain that you can't be certain. That's impossible. You just argued around in a circle there. Yeah. And yet people like Hume and other skeptics, who really followed skepticism, have nevertheless tenaciously clung to this right down through history. We have people today, many people today, who follow skepticism, and of course many, many, many more people who wouldn't know skepticism from secularism by definition or as a worldview, but who follow it nevertheless, who are skeptics and are skeptical in their life. Well, another way I could explain skepticism as a philosophy is to say that it falls somewhere between agnosticism and atheism. It falls somewhere between agnosticism and atheism. These are all isms. Now, atheism and agnosticism are generally discussed in religious contexts under the question of theism, that is, the possibility of the existence of God. But the atheist has something to say in his response about the possibility of the existence of God. The agnostic has something else to say. Agnosticism also, atheism not, but agnosticism also applies to other areas besides just theological or metaphysical areas. And so does skepticism. But let me explain it this way. If you were to write these three words down in this order, one on top of the other, atheism, or one underneath the other, atheism, skepticism, agnosticism, then here's what you would have out beside those three respectively. Atheism says no. He says, I know, and the answer is no. N-O. Skepticism says probably no. Agnosticism says, I don't know. K-N-O-W. Okay, there's the difference briefly between the three, and that's why skepticism falls in between. Atheism says, no, God does not exist. I'm positive about the matter. Theism, atheism, you just subtract what you have from theism, you end up with nothing. God does not exist. I know that the answer is no. Skepticism says probably no. Skepticism says probably no. Agnosticism, the man would say, I don't know. Gnostis or gnosis, knowledge, I don't have knowledge, I just don't know. The atheist says no, the agnostic, I don't know, the skeptic, probably no. In other words, skepticism is really more than suspended judgment. That's sometimes a side definition found in dictionaries anyway of skepticism, that it is suspended judgment. No, suspended judgment is agnosticism. I don't know. That's suspended judgment. I suspend judgment. I don't know whether God exists or whether he doesn't. I don't know whether there's a hell or heaven. I'm not going to say there is. I'm not going to say there isn't. I just don't know. I suspend judgment. The skeptic doesn't really suspend judgment. He leans closer to atheism than he does to agnosticism. He says probably no. In other words, you should be able to hear in the term skepticism the word or the concept doubt. I doubt such and such is true. Now, an agnostic won't say, I doubt that it's true, because then he's almost saying that it isn't. He will only say, I don't know whether it's true or not. I just don't know. I leave it an open question, fair game. I suspend my judgment. With skepticism, there's always an element of doubt. Take the case we opened with this morning in Thomas. He doesn't just say, no, Jesus doesn't exist, as far as in a resurrected bodily form. He says, except I shall see such and such, I will not believe it. In other words, I'm, for the most part, inclined not to believe this. Now, he leaves the door open saying, except I can see this, then I'll believe. The atheist would never say, well, except. He just knows that God doesn't exist. He knows that the answer is no. Thomas didn't go that far. Had he gone that far, I don't know that there'd be any way back out of it. He didn't go that far, but he was certainly following the philosophy of skepticism. He was certainly skeptical, doubtful about the claims that the apostles were making. We've seen the Lord. He's risen. Thomas says, I doubt that. I doubt that seriously. Except I shall see the nail print and the hole in the side and thrust my finger in my hand, I will not believe. I doubt seriously. I doubt. I'm skeptical about that. And we see that Jesus answers his skepticism. His skepticism was ill-founded. He had the eyewitness report. I mean, he didn't have to base that on anything but good, honest eyewitness reporting. And Jesus, that's why Jesus has to go on to say, you believe because of visible evidence, not only your own. Now, that's what you had to have, but you had it of the earlier apostles. Blessed are they who have not seen and yet believe. You say, well, we can go on their eyewitness accounts as well. Well, that's true, but Thomas could talk to them. There was still something physical and immediate and vocal and visible that was present in it all. We're 2,000 years removed. Let me discuss something with you about the origins of skepticism as a philosophy. I think you'll find this to be interesting. And I think that perhaps you'll find through this all that this is also the origin of any skepticism in your own life. Skepticism has similar origins, whether we're talking about its origins throughout the world, throughout humanity, as a major philosophy that arose in the last few hundred years, or whether skepticism, to some measure or another, a greater or smaller degree, arises in your own life. I think the causes for its origin will be the same, whether it's universal or whether it's individual. The causes will be the same. In the first place, I'll give you two contributing factors that combine to produce the origin of skepticism universally. First of all, man's progress. And I'll have to explain what I mean by that. And I hope you'll see through this all how everything is tied to that umbrella of secularism. With secularization, modern technology, and all that we looked at there. Man's progress. As you know, over the last few hundred years, in the rise of the universities, higher education, and modern science, that man has challenged his ancestors at just about every turn in the road. He has challenged what his ancestors believed. And in our day and age, and as time has gone on, the time gap between the challenged and the challenger is shortening all the time. Man, over the last few decades even, has made so much progress that, let's say, medical or scientific textbooks just done 10 years ago become quickly obsolete. They're quickly out of date. They can become out of date because of man's quest, his incessant quest for more knowledge and for more understanding and for new ways of doing things. So what happens? At one time there was an established belief or an established way of doing things or an established mechanism, and there just weren't any changes wrought in it at all. Man has made so much progress, and it's so quick and so rapid that you tend to trust man. Then you know, well, this is going to be out of date. And the time gap, I'm saying, between the challenged, what was challenged, and the challenger is shortening all the time. You know, when this first started, the rise of modern science, you know, we challenged ancient views of the universe, or ancient views of motion, or ancient views of whatever. And now that time gap is shortening all the time. A man in 1970 is challenging something said in 1965. And a man in 1985 is challenging something that was written in 1984. That time gap is shortening all the time. So here's what's happening. You become skeptical about everything. You ask yourself, is knowledge even possible? I mean, knowledge is at the root and the basis of skepticism here. Knowledge, certainty about anything is not possible. Well, I can see why people are ending up with that view. We're having to rewrite our textbooks every year, it seems like, and the theories are being challenged all the time. And so, you know, you don't sit down and think about it, and I think I'm going to become skeptical. It's just a byproduct of the age. You start realizing around you that people are not trustworthy, and they're not trustworthy because we're becoming too smart. We're always finding a new way, or a better way, or the way that something is, or to do something. And so you simply don't trust man because he is progressing so fast. Now, there, to be sure, were skeptics. Skepticism was a philosophy. It's been latently present, all through human history. People have simply not believed God, or have been inclined not to believe God, and so forth. The Greeks had a philosophy of skepticism. It was kind of more of an indifference, I think, than a blatant skepticism possessed by them. It was a measure of stoical indifference. But it's only within the last couple of hundred years that you've really seen the rise of the modern philosophy known as skepticism. And I would say it's due in the first place to man's progress. And then secondly, and right on the heels of that, would be the refusal of modern man to accept anyone as an authority. I guess it's because who is an authority? Everyone is always changing, or someone's being challenged and they're losing the challenge by a newer person or a newer idea. Skepticism, I would say, originates in the refusal to accept anyone as an authority. In other words, we will not take anyone's word for anything. Here's exactly the problem of Thomas here. He would not take someone else's word. He had to have it for himself. Individualism, existentialism, or some other recent philosophies that, as you can see from what I'm saying now, contribute to all of this. If we're seeing this challenge because of man's progress, and at the same time from other quarters, existentialism and individualism are on the rise, then all this combines where you say, I refuse to take anyone's word for anything. And we also see a loss of truthfulness in America and in just the society at large today. All these things are combining, and you say, I refuse to take anyone's word for anything. I will only believe what I believe. Well, you see, you're so limited in your experience and your knowledge that will have to leave you skeptical concerning most of the major things in the world. You don't have time to go there or study it or whatever or experience it. So you have to just remain skeptical about it. I'm skeptical. I doubt that. And you might be asking yourself the question, why don't just more people remain agnostic and just say, I don't know? It's the spirit of the age. Not just to remain kind of meekly, although there's pride involved in that. When God says we can know, and man says I don't know or I can't know, God says we can, why don't people just kind of meekly remain in agnosticism and just that mellow agnostic say, oh, I don't know? If you've got one side or the other to pick, why is it people, rather than saying, oh, I'm inclined to believe that, people say, I'm inclined not to believe that? It's a spirit of the age to doubt. To doubt. I would say, dear friends, it's harder to believe God today than it has been at any other time. People were trained in earlier generations to trust the authorities, to trust your church leaders, to trust your elders, to trust the government, to trust church dogma and church doctrine. People are trained away from that today. They're trained to be doubtful about things. Guilty until proven innocent. Guilty until proven innocent. My inclination is not going to just hang in the balance of agnosticism, and I'm certainly not going to be inclined to believe. I'm going to go to the left and not to the right, inclined to doubt that these things are true. It's much harder to believe God. Think of the combination of forces and isms that are against us today as major views. Think of all we've said about secularism, all the isms you already know and more that we're going to come to. Think of the combined weight of these against the mind of a late 20th century American Christian reading God's Word and being expected of the God of heaven to believe Him without reservation, without recourse, to believe Him without doubt, to believe Him without hesitation. That's the type of faith God requires of us. The spirit of the age is not just a skeptical spirit, but it's a spirit that's going to lead to atheism. I know the answer, and the answer is no. More and more people are saying no to this, no to that, and I'm certain that the answer is no. But we see other steps that pave the way. Gnosticism, I don't know. Skepticism, I do know, and it's probably no. To atheism, I do know, and it's no. That's the end of man then. When he says, I do know, he sets himself up as God then. I do know. And the answer is no. Well, back to what I was saying. Refusal to accept anyone as an authority. You see, if point one is true, that man has made so much progress, he's being challenged all the time by newer theories, then who is an authority? You say, well, the newest person who has the best theory. No, because we already suspect that his theory will be out of date next year. If time is going to be like time has been, we already suspect that the modern view won't hold up either. And so what happens? Eventually a person just throws their hands up in despair saying, well, there's just no hope. I just don't believe you can be certain about anything in life. With the tendency, with the tone of that uncertainty being doubt. Not just I'm uncertain that we can know, but I doubt the things that people say they do know are in fact true. You may find this to be interesting. The term skepticism, skeptic, skeptical, come from the Greek word skepticus. You know what that means? Thoughtful. Thoughtful. That's really the origin of skepticism, skeptical. Comes from the Greek skepticus. There's a similar Latin word, which simply means thoughtful. Okay, well here you see is what people have done today. They have begun to think. Well, thinking this way. Well, if we are progressing so rapidly, today's authority is tomorrow's fool, then I think, here he goes thinking, then I think we just can't know anything. So it has a good origin. I mean, at least the word skepticism is faithful to its origin. People are beginning to think. It means to be thoughtful. They are beginning to put the pieces of this puzzle together and say, I just don't think we can know. How many people have you run into? I know I've run into my share of them in the church who have seen all, or maybe outside of the church, sometimes it's even better outside of the church, who have seen all the conflicting theories in the church. The Roman Catholics have theirs, the Protestants have theirs, the Lutherans, the Presbyterians, the Baptists, the Pentecostals. And what does a variety of anything do immediately? Lead one to skepticism. I think I said that in a recent message. Variety generally produces skepticism. Because you have to ask yourself, well, if these people all think they have the truth, and we know none of them could have the truth, not all of them, let's say, could have the truth, then who am I to think I can ever have the truth? If the Baptists say they've got it, and the Catholics don't, the Catholics say they have it, and the Lutherans don't, and the Lutherans say they have it, and the Methodists don't, and the Methodists say they have it, and the Pentecostals don't, and you can just keep on going, and the Pentecostals say they have it, and the Marxists don't, and the Marxists say they have it, and the Communists don't. All the variety of views leads one to throw up his hands in despair and say, knowledge about anything is impossible. That is, certainty in any area is uncertain. Certainty in any area is simply not possible. But I think what has happened is we've been driven to that. We've been driven to that on a basis that's not valid. Because we need to pause long enough, and this is what we've done in this church over the years, and ask ourselves this question. Well, to be sure, many people have many views. But does that mean there's still not one right way somewhere? For someone, somehow, someday? Is there still not one right way? And then the concomitant question, is it not possible to somehow arrive at that conclusion? The right way, the right view? You see, skepticism looks at the evidence, but it doesn't look behind the evidence. It doesn't look any deeper. It just says, look at the conflicting opinions. Who's to say? I don't know how many people I've had tell me that. Well, now, the reason I don't go to church is, who am I supposed to believe? The Baptists or you or someone else told me this, and you tell me this, and somebody, and so what are they? I'm skeptical about all of that. I'm inclined not to believe any of that. If there was agreement, they would say, if there was agreement about the truth, so that everyone who said they had the truth, then I would believe. You know what? That's a lie from the pit of hell. Because if we all really had the truth, you know what truth it'd be? It'd be God's truth. It'd be that strong, demanding, requiring truth of God's truth. And whenever man found out that's the truth, no way am I going to follow that. I'm not skeptical about anything anymore. I'm an atheist about it now. No way am I going to follow that. That's just a lie to say, well, now, if there was just agreement, if all the people in the ecumenical world and spirit could get together, then we'll have harmony and we'll win the whole world. Well, you may win them to your ecumenical spirit, but if the ecumenical movement was centered upon truth, and it's a contradiction of terms to even assume that, there's no way you'd win the world to truth. The people don't want truth. But people do like skepticism, and what they use as an excuse for not coming to church or not believing this or not even striving to study or to know the answer, what they use as an excuse is the variety of opinions out there. And the Christian should use that just the opposite. He should use that not as as a mark of the uncertainty of knowledge, but as a mark of the certainty of Satan's subtlety and divisiveness. I mean, that's exactly what it proves. The wily foe that we have, Satan, his divisiveness and his subtlety. The skeptic would say, well, what that proves is that certainty is not possible. I think it proves that certainty is possible. There's one thing we can be certain about. Satan is in the business of confusing people. Or tell me why we have all these views out there. Satan, we can be certain about that. Satan is in the business of confusing people. He's the one who's sowing all these false theories. And the Christian would want to go a step further and be encouraged by the fact that there are so many views out there to do his best and diligently seek the one true answer. It's going to be more difficult then. It should encourage him to really be busy about seeking the truth and knowing what the truth is, since there are so many possibilities out there. And you know, friends, what this all boils down to is simply the Word of God. And I'm always giving you these various theories just to make you think of what the Catholics say. It's really not that confusing. What does the Word of God say? Amen. You know, it's really easy to see. Hallelujah. It really is. I just throw these theories out to make it more interesting, maybe to make the truth more precious to you. Amen. And maybe that's sometimes what it takes, is to have a diamond in the rough. Before it's anything, if you just got a yard full of diamonds, well, just diamonds are diamonds. If you have a diamond in the rough, if that's where you discover your diamond, well, your diamond, by contrast, the beauty stands out. If you had a diamond next to a diamond next to a diamond next to a gem next to a gem next to a gem, well, they're just all one big pot of glory for you. If you've got a diamond next to a boat anchor and an old rusty nail and maybe a fence post and a pile of cow droppings, and you've got a diamond in the midst of all of that, well, the beauty of it all stands out. By contrast, look at its worth. Look at its worth, and look at the lack of worth and all this other junk that's found around it. Well, we'll study that some other time in theology. People ask, well, why did God ever allow evil in the universe to begin with? Well, that's one of the answers that a lot of people give. God allowed evil so that truth and righteousness could be seen for what they are. How would you know beauty and truth and purity without ugliness and error and deception everywhere? It really stands out. I mean, if there just weren't any false theories about Jesus Christ, and I know we haven't gotten into really studying about these in theology, whenever we do, then I think his person and his magnificence and his beauty will astound you that much more. When you know what everyone has said about him falsely, and then you set who he really is, according to the biblical record, over against what people say about him, you just can't believe the difference. You know, you could just take it for granted. Well, he's the Son of God. Well, what does it mean to be the Son of God? By adoption, as we saw in our biblical lit study? Or you think about Jesus' sacrifice. Well, now you set that over against the JDS heresy, and you see what a Savior we have. Not a sinning Savior, like a lot of people are saying. If we didn't have that to contrast, I know that some people would oppose that theory of the reason for the origin of evil. There may be some other things that go in that, but I think, let me say it this way. I think now that we have evil, regardless of why evil originated, now that we have evil, I know that it works to the good of righteousness. I know that it does. Now, maybe that wasn't the reason someone would say that evil originated. Well, forget origins for right now. Let's deal with where we are. We weren't in the origin. We're in the here and the now. I know that evil works for the good of good. That you can see good better whenever you see evil. I mean, if you know evil people and then you meet a good person, what if all people were good? We were just all copies of goodness. Well, it kind of get boring after a while. Have you ever fellowshiped with, someone on a different level or a lower level or carnal and just dissatisfied? And then you had the privilege of fellowshipping with someone who really ministered to you and ministered to your spirit, and you say, praise God, that was a lot of fun. That was a good talk we had. Good conversation. Would you have said that if the last 50 people you had talked to had given you the same? I doubt it. Maybe you'd take it for granted after a while. Maybe that's why people are doing this the same way. They're not thinking about these things. They're not thinking. Skepticism as a major philosophy has generally had its doubt directed toward religious questions. Some of those important ones being immortality, the existence of the deity, providence. Oh, there's a big one, providence, and revelation. It generally has its doubt directed toward religious questions. Not doubt toward the media or doubt toward weather forecasters or whatever, but doubt, I'm saying skepticism as a major philosophy has its doubt directed toward religious questions. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with that because we've already touched on this with secularism. But like providence, people just don't believe that God is in control of weather patterns anymore. They don't believe God's in control. They don't believe God's in control of nations, that he sets up one and brings down another. They see it all by, internal military coup d'etat or because of grain prices or because of whatever. They see, well, now this dictator got overthrown and then this one was set up and this country changed to this form of government. And they don't believe that God is the one. It's the Most High, Daniel 4:17, who sets up the kingdoms of men and sets up kings over those kingdoms. It's the Most High who does that. Amen. It's not voting in this country. It's not coups in other countries. It's the Most High. Amen. Very few people believe that anymore. If they believed that, they wouldn't vote. Right. If they really believed that, they wouldn't vote. Christians don't believe that in this country. They believe God works through the democratic process. called the Republican and Democratic Party. Voting, the voting mentality. That's not what my Bible says, not what the Word teaches. And they'll get real logical. Now wait a minute, God has to have things to work through. He's going to set up a new president, but he's going to work through the voting constituency. Well, that sounds like logic gone to seed to me. And they certainly don't believe God controls weather anymore. God's not in control, or God controls reproduction in animals and people. No, God doesn't control that. It's just, that's people or animals. There's no control of God over that. Well, they saw it in the Old Testament as God's control. God hath withheld her from child. And they prayed, and God gave conception. They saw God as being responsible for all of that. So providence is a heavyweight area toward which skepticism is often directed. That we simply, and we saw this in secularism, that people simply don't believe, or they're inclined not to believe, that God is in control of the events of the world. Now, before we go too far in skepticism this morning, maybe we need to just quickly address and correct maybe an image or stereotype that you have of a skeptic. It may be something on this order. A professor at a liberal religious institution whose glasses have slid down to the tip of his nose and his eyebrows are raised. Oh, there's a skeptic for you. A skeptic can be a pretty dainty little Baptist Sunday school teacher. We want to rid ourselves of the notion that a skeptic has to be some old cigar-chomping professor of religious education at a liberal institution or something, with his raised eyebrows and glasses slid down on his nose, and you're trying to tell him that, I heard a voice from God yesterday. Oh, you did? Ha-ha! He smiles. That's good news. We're going to put you in the psychology class now. And he just laughs at that. No, you could be a skeptic. Little old you out there. You don't chomp on cigars, do you? Do you? You don't chomp on cigars. You could be a skeptic. Pretty little innocent you with your green eyes and whatever color hair. I don't want to get too specific. You may think I'm talking about you, or brown hair, red hair, black hair, blonde. We cover everyone. You could be a skeptic. Skepticism, he's no respecter of education or color of hair, or it can infect and affect everyone. No, people aren't skeptics who are only found in higher education. Skepticism can affect you right where you are in your life. You say how and why, by and why, some of the ways I've just said. The plurality and variety of views out there. What that has tended to do for me over the long run is make me more desirous to know the truth. I guess the more I see that people have all these views, I'm just convinced there's truth hidden somewhere. I just know that's the way God is. He's going to hide it somewhere. I know it's there. I just got to find it. Lost man, I just don't think it's there. In other words, there are no final answers to anything. There just are no final answers. It's everyone for himself. What fits for you, what's pragmatic works. Then all these other philosophies, it's like the tentacles on an octopus. They all start reaching out and filling in the picture then. That final answers are not possible because they don't exist. There aren't final answers. I'm more and more convinced there are final answers. To each question, one final answer. And if I know God at all, He's hidden it from the wise and the prudent. He's hidden it from them. It's hidden out there. They're taking stabs, and one will stab, and we'll call that secularism, and someone else will stab, and we call that pragmatism, and someone else stabs, and we call that, well, that's existentialism. I know a name for that. Or someone else stabs, and that's hedonism. Or someone else stabs, and that's skepticism. God lets people take their stabs, and they're all missing it. And it seems like everyone maybe has bits and pieces of what is right or could be right, or could be construed into something right if you left off the wrong and gathered some more rights to it. But no one has it, though. That's what the skeptic keeps saying. No one has it. Why is it we've never been able to nail down? And you see, what they're failing to think about is man's fall. Well, they don't even believe in that to begin with. But they don't believe in man's fall, or not taking that into consideration, that his mind has been blinded. Because you see, their reasoning, if you're not following me well enough, if there is an answer, let's say to to world military problems. We are all rational human beings. People in the Soviet Union are rational people. We are rational in this country. If there is an answer, why can we not settle that answer, solve the problem, and unite over that? Why can't we find answers to the world's problems? That's what the skeptic keeps asking himself. Why can't we find an answer? We're all rational people. We're not beasts down here. Do we want the globe's destruction? None of us want that. No nation wants that, except maybe one of those North African nations where Gaddafi lives. I guess he'd want the world destroyed, maybe himself included, but people don't want the world destroyed. If we all have the same goal, peace, harmony, food for enough men in the world, money for everyone, why can't we simply find a solution? We can't seem to find any solutions. Well, you see, that type of mentality is forgetting a lot of things, that this world has been marred by sin, and that, well, A, the world's problems are spiritual problems and will be only answered with spiritual answers.
Amen.
And B, there won't come a perfect time in the state of this world until the millennium and the eternal life.
Amen.
You soon give up on thinking about it now. You will not find a way to feed all men, to control the weather, for everyone to be prosperous, for there to be no war. You won't find a time like that until the millennium. That is an impossible situation. You see, if the world of our day would get into God's Word would inform them of that matter.
Amen.
That there will come a time when they'll beat their swords into plows and their pruning hooks, or their spears into pruning hooks, and that nation will not learn war anymore. But that nation will not learn war anymore when the Prince of Peace comes during the millennium.
Amen.
You say, well, how could you serve in government if you were of the view? Well, you wouldn't. You see, that's the whole thing. You'd be a Christian then, a real, honest-to-goodness, dyed-in-the-wool, old-fashioned, Brontosaurian Christian, just like they were back in the original days. You wouldn't serve in government because government's dead end. It's a dead end. Nothing but red tape everywhere, trying to solve everybody's problems for everybody at the same time. You can't do it. So what happens? You find the group that will pay you the most, or that lobbies the best, and you solve theirs. It's just a pragmatic end. You can't solve all the problems. So you try to find a pragmatic solution to everything. Or maybe a utilitarian. Which answer will help the most people, give the most good to the most people? Sorry about those ones we'll leave out. Well, God, you see, He doesn't leave His people out. He doesn't help the best in His kingdom and leave out the least. God includes them all.
Hallelujah.
He doesn't have a pragmatic solution toward things. Therefore, we certainly shouldn't be skeptical about these things. So let's do away with that image or stereotype of a professor in a liberal religious school with raised eyebrows over your claim that, well, I got healed yesterday without the aid of medical science or something. You know, he's just going to laugh you into the ground. Well, that's not the only type of skeptic. The skeptic could be a nice little every Sunday attending church member who's skeptical about religious questions, who's skeptical about the existence of God, who's skeptical about providence, who's skeptical about revelation, who's skeptical about the authority of Scripture, who may be getting more to this church, who is skeptical about divine healing, who is skeptical about prosperity, who is skeptical about ever really knowing the truth. The Scriptures, every time they address the subject of doubt, every time the apostles doubted, then we have the subject of skepticism being addressed. We don't have to find the word there, and you won't find it. Skepticism, all you have to do is find the word doubt. You already have gone on one side. You haven't stayed with the agnostic, I don't know. You've gone on one side. Well, I don't know, but I'm inclined to know, and I think the answer is no. No, it won't work. No, we can't do it. No, we don't have enough. The apostles would say over and over, whether they were in the boat or dealing with a demoniac case and they couldn't get the demon out. They were skeptical. I don't believe. Jesus said it's because of your unbelief. You don't believe. You are skeptical. You are doubtful about them. Skepticism is a manifestation of pride. Of all things, it's a false humility. Here, skepticism, I'm speaking bordering on agnosticism. Because skepticism says you can't know. And God says you can. Skepticism tells us certainty is not possible. God says that it is. So when you say that it isn't, God says that it is, that's pride. You put yourself in the place of God. Now you've issued a new universal law. Knowledge, certainty is not possible. And you have contradicted an already given universal law. Knowledge and certainty are possible, says the Lord, if you get into His Word. And you've contradicted that. It's false humility, because that sounds real pious for a person, especially once they've gone way high in education, to say, well, knowledge is just not possible. Oh, that sounds so pious and saccharine sweet. And you look at him who has all these degrees and you think how humble of that great man, that great educator who has all this knowledge, and he's willing to humble himself and say certainty is not possible. That's a false humility. You see, false humility always is involved whenever a person is humble when they shouldn't be.
Amen.
Humble when they shouldn't be. You know, if God, in other words, were to say, I'm not God, that's false humility. To say what isn't when it is. To say He's not when He is. That's false humility. We discussed this on our tapes on humility and Christian ethics. No one expects you to stand up if you're intelligent and say, I'm just the dumbest person in the building. People do that all the time in church circles. They think that's being humble. They call it humble. They think it's being humble. Or a real attractive woman to say, I'm so homely. Just bear with me, please. And she's an astounding beauty. Or generally you hear it like this. Someone stands up who can really sing. I've been in so many denominational churches where they say, I can't sing. I can't sing. You just pray. Will you pray with me that God will help me get through this? With a confession like that, you need a prayer to get through that song. But they can sing beautifully. That's false humility. Oh, I can't sing. I can't sing. You see what I'm talking about? I've heard that many times in denominational circles where people will stand up because they kind of already feel awkward entertaining the people. And by the way, you should. You shouldn't be entertaining. They already are convicted about their entertainment role there. And so they cover that up and cloak that over about pretending like they're pious and saccharine sweet, I would say. Humble. Oh, I can't sing. I can't sing. It's all by the grace of God. They'll look up to heaven. It's all by the grace of God. Well, you don't have to tell us you can't sing. If you can't, we'll find out about it in a few moments, that's for sure. You don't have to tell us that you can't. We'll find out. And if you tell us that you can't, we find out you can. We're going to call you a liar then. You see, you're going to lose either way you go. If you say you can't, we'll find out. You don't have to tell us about it. We found out some of you in our church can't sing. You don't have to tell us. You just opened your mouth. We found out you couldn't. Now that's all right. You can still sing a noise unto the Lord, and we'll listen and rejoice. But you don't have to stand up and say, praise God, I can't sing. Just by the grace of God, we'll find out that you can't in a hurry. Then if you stand up and say, I can't, and you can, we're going to say you're a liar. You know, someone should stop one of those great vocalists afterwards and say, I thought you told me you couldn't sing, you blasphemous liar. Next time, I may do that now that I think of it. Next time. Some of you, I can tell, you understand what I'm saying, but you've never been in a church where you heard things like that. I just heard it. That's the Baptist thing to do. Oh, I just heard it time after time. False humility. I just can't sing. It's all by the grace of God. And they just let out this beautiful voice, you know. And I think, you false thing. That's false humility. Well, the same thing is true with skepticism. I don't know. We can't know. Certainty's not possible. God says certainty is possible. You can know who God is. You can know who His Son is. You can know the Bible is the Word of God. You can know there is a heaven and a hell.
Amen.
You can know these things. You don't have to be uncertain about them. You can know them. You can know that divine healing is true.
Praise God.
You see, the skeptic, I don't know. I don't know whether it's true or not. You can know. You can either know that it is true or you can know that it's not. I mean, you can come to a place where you can know.
That's right.
You don't have to stay in between. Well, I don't know. Or knowledge, certainty is not possible. Certainty, let me say it this way, about anything that's important. Certainty about anything that's important is always possible. Now, I'm not certain what the weather's going to hold for tomorrow. That's not that important. Certainty about anything that's important, I mean life and death questions, eternal questions, metaphysical questions, to use our term that I briefly educated you in not that long ago. Certainty about those things is always possible. Always possible. Some people in churches where they've listened to an evangelistic message responded this way: well, I'm not certain that I am a sinner. You can know. You can know that you are a sinner. You are fooling yourself if you say, I'm not certain. When God revealed himself to me, I knew that I was undone and a man of unclean lips. I knew that. You can know that you're a sinner. And you know what the flip side of that is? You can know that you're the righteousness of God in Christ Jesus. You can know that. You don't have to guess about that or say, well, it doesn't depend on feelings. It depends on God's Word. It doesn't depend on individualism. Well, do I feel it? Maybe someone else does, but I don't. It only depends on God's Word. You can be certain about anything that's important. You can know that you're the righteousness of God in Christ Jesus. You can know that God hears your prayers when you pray. There's certain ways to know. There's certain ways to know that he didn't hear them too. But at least you get to know. I'd rather know one way or the other, either that I got heard or that I didn't get heard, rather than, well, I don't know one way or the other whether God is heard or not. That's the way the church of our day is. So this is a prideful, falsely humble type doctrine, skepticism. It says we can't know when God says we can't. I would say that it's also paralyzing in your Christian life. It will paralyze you as a Christian. It leaves you dead stuck at 0 miles per hour. People, I think, sometimes use skepticism as a safety device. That way they don't have to go forward or backwards. They don't have to commit themselves to anything. But Jesus said, if you're not going forward, you are going backward. Skepticism is paralyzing. It robs a person of their faith. It leaves null and void any hope or conviction in your life. There are a lot of references to it in Scripture. We haven't taken the time to mention many of these, but you're familiar with all of these. Israel, in her wilderness wanderings, was a skeptical people. They did not believe. They were inclined to doubt whether or not God would take care of them. And what we see from the pages of Scripture, friends, and this is a rather sobering lesson to learn, is that for those who are inclined to doubt God, he gives them just what they're expecting. You write that down. For those who are inclined to doubt God, he gives them just what they're expecting, nothing. They ask in Psalm 78:19, can God, listen to this false piety here, can God furnish a table in the wilderness? As though that's too hard for the Lord to create food when there is no food for 3 million people in a desert region. Can God furnish and prepare a table in the wilderness? Psalm 78:19. In 1 Kings 18:21, Elijah battling on Mount Carmel with the false prophets of Jezebel and Baal, 850 false prophets. He asked the people this question: if Baal be God, then follow him. If the Lord be God, then follow him. And what's that last phrase in 1 Kings 18:21 say? The people answered him not a word. Non-committal. We're not going to go forward. We're not going to go backward. We're skeptical. We're staying right here. It's paralyzing is what it is. It's paralyzing. The only thing you will commit yourself to is the fact that you can't be committed to anything. A couple of verses really stand out in my mind from the Old and from the New Testament. In 2 Chronicles 16:9, we're told that God's eye is roving over the earth, looking back and forth, seeking for a man that will believe him, one whose heart is perfect toward him. One who believes him. One whose heart is perfect toward him. He's going to do things great in their behalf. He's going to show himself strong in their behalf. Those people who doubt God, as a result, they get just what they're expecting, nothing. And I guess that kind of confirms their skepticism. Well, I told you, after all, it doesn't work. It hasn't ever worked for me. It never worked for those who don't believe. Your unbelief becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy then. You say, oh, I doubt it'll happen. And sure enough, it does. And you say, that's right, I knew it wouldn't happen. And what ensured the fact that it wouldn't happen is your own doubt. You see, they thought it wasn't going to happen anyway. It might have happened. What ensured that it didn't happen was your own doubt. I knew it wouldn't happen. They get confirmed over and over and over again in their unbelief. People pray that way for healing. They pray. They'll come up and pray, ask for prayer, for healing. And you don't know if you don't know the person or really sit them down and question them whether they're believing. You know, they've got to know some conditions and meet those conditions.
Amen.
And they come up, well, I want prayer, and they get prayer, and then they leave, and they wait a while, and it doesn't happen. They tell someone, it gets back to you. I've had this happen, not with someone I'm thinking here, but it's happened to me before, and it got back to me. I knew it wouldn't happen. And what I want to tell the person is, that's your whole problem. Amen. That's why it didn't happen for you. Is you came with expectation, all right, but it was skepticism. You expected for it not to happen. You got just what you were expecting, nothing at all. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy for them. People say, God, He's not moving, He's not doing anything. He's only not moving or not doing anything for those who are saying He's not moving or doing anything.
Amen.
It only works for those people. Those who believe God is moving and doing things, and He is working in my life and speaking, then He is. You say, boy, that sounds like, what it sounds like to me is faith. God requires faith. If you don't believe, He doesn't move. Not in your life anyway. If you don't trust, He doesn't act. 2 Chronicles 16:9. And then the counterpart over in the New Testament. I mean, God was looking for people. We're told in 2 Chronicles 16. He's looking for people. Well, we've got a searchlight passage in the New. Luke 18:8. Where Jesus asked this question, when the Son of Man returns, shall He find faith on the earth?
Amen.
Luke 18:8. When the Son of Man shall return, shall He find any faith on the earth? That's God's searchlight verse there. He's going to return very soon. And what He's looking for is faith on the earth. Not doubt. God's not looking for doubt or skepticism. God's looking for faith. When He finds faith, He'll respond accordingly, and He'll do what that person is believing based on His Word. He will do what His Word has to say. But for the person who chooses to doubt, he'll get exactly what he's expecting. Absolutely nothing.